there are some key strategies in here that the big brands use, the big retailers use, that up until now, most small brands like us wouldn't have even known about.
Which leads us nicely onto the next step in your book. And it's all about how we actually get traffic onto our site, how we get people looking and buying our products. So you've called it the 30,000 foot marketing strategy. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so this is something that we break down in chapter 6. So I discuss building your 30,000 foot marketing strategy because we want to devise a strategic plan instead of just randomly throwing some money at ads and hoping that it sticks, right? That's a surefire way to eventually just go out of business. We want to make sure that we understand the customer journey and we can leverage platforms like Google Ads and Meta Ads to ensure that we're bringing customers back into our ecosystem through things like email marketing or retargeting to ensure that their likelihood of making sales and purchasing from our store is maximized. So if you think of ads and Google Ads a bit like conversation starters, right? That's kind of to get the product in front of a customer. We don't go to a party if we know someone's a real cooking enthusiast, and we don't just go up to them and start talking to them about football if we know that they have no interest or they hate football. We don't just start the conversation with football and then try and keep forcing the conversation to be all about football when you know this person's not remotely interested in it, right? They're going to switch off. It's going to be an uphill battle trying to hold that conversation. It's going to cause you a lot of effort and ultimately it's just problematic, right? It's the same thing with ads. We tailor the conversation, so the ads, to match the person's interest, i.e. what they've searched for. It's much less effort this way. It's much cheaper because we're not trying to force a topic on customers by just, getting in front of them on their social media newsfeed with a product and trying to interrupt their day with some product that they might not even be looking for. Instead, we're going to them with the thing that they're most interested in, putting it right in front of them in an ad format and saying, only click me if you're interested in potentially purchasing this thing. That way we get much higher converting traffic and it just leads to a much lower cost per acquisition to acquire that customer in the first place.
And it's so important to have a strategy in place. And once you've got a strategy in place, the right type of people will come to your website and they'll be ready to buy when they're on your website. And that's where it really starts to get exciting. You'll start to hear that cha-ching on your phone. You get the sales coming through from Shopify. And now that you've got your ad set up, it can be done on autopilot essentially, because you set it in the way that we show you it with Google Ads, and you don't need to be constantly looking at it. It will be bringing people onto your store. It'll be converting those people into customers, and then you can just reap the rewards of the work that you've done to put those ads in place. So the next step, now that we've got some customers on board, is actually retaining those customers. And often to increase your profit, the best thing you can do is to get people to buy again instead of going out to find new customers again and again. So how does your book advise people and businesses to win back lost customers and potentially go ahead and double their sales?
Yeah, that's a great point. And even before we talk about retaining customers to come back and purchase for a second or third time, I would even view it as how do we retain visitors as customers? So it's like before they even become customers, they're one of the early indicators that they might become customers is that they've visited our website, right? So how do we ensure that the visitors to our website are not wasted and that we get them to come back and complete that purchase? Because otherwise we paid for a click on ads and it was wasted if they then leave the website, right? So in the book, we address the importance of this whole concept. And if you imagine that if you had a bucket and it had lots of holes in it and you're pouring water into it and the water's just pouring out all of the holes, you just keep pouring water into it at a faster and faster pace, but the bucket's got holes in it, right? It's a leaky bucket. So it's the same in e-commerce with this. If you have a leaky system of ads, then your customers are or your visitors are disappearing or leaving faster than you can pour new visitors in. And so you're not making up for that in the conversions through to people becoming customers. So it gets expensive because you're just throwing more money at ads and hoping that things convert better, but they're just not. So there are some key strategies in here that the big brands use, the big retailers use, that up until now, most small brands like us wouldn't have even known about. We wouldn't have been able to apply these systems. But in chapter 8 of the Home Turf Advantage book, we now talk about these and we guide you through how to set them up so that by the end of that chapter, you have things like your dynamic remarketing campaign set up. So your brand can become omnipresent in your customer's world. So, if you've ever looked up a pair of trainers online and then the next day you're on Instagram or TikTok or something and you see an ad for them, And you're like, how did they know that I was interested? And you forget that you viewed it once on a website, you got pixeled by the website, and now that ad follows you around the internet. And so you become omnipresent, because after the 30th time they've seen that same pair of trainers from that same brand on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Google display in a sidebar on the Guardian website and all over, eventually you're going to think, oh, well, maybe I just buy them. And oh, that's the brand that comes to mind because you've seen it so many times. The big brands have played on this kind of billboard marketing effect for years, and now we can do the same as smaller retailers because of the way that the ad systems work. So we guide you through how to do that. We show you how to set that up, so it's basically set it and forget it. You don't need to do this more than once. Once you've set it up, it's dynamic. It will auto run for you. There are other things like email marketing systems. We give you the plug and play email flows that you can kind of just plug in your messaging to for your brand and then let them run again. That will just bring back customers who maybe abandoned the checkout before purchasing, try and win them back. And so, yeah, all of these strategies, once we set them up, work for you 24/7, 365 days a year. So you literally sit back and you can be making sales at midnight on Christmas Day without having to be there in person. It's a fantastic system, but it just takes a bit of front loading of the work. So in chapter 8, we guide you through how to do that.
And we're so fortunate that these tools that the big boys use, these big brands where they are always following you around the internet, we're so fortunate that these tools are available to us as smaller retailers when we first get started. On day one, when you first start running your ads, you can put an ad right at the very top of the search engine results page above the businesses that have spent years to get their organic listings there. We can go right above that with an ad from day one. And then after somebody's clicked on that ad, we can follow them around the internet and show them what an omnipresent business that we are. And straight away, we have that authority. As long as you get your ad set up in the correct way, we can show people that we're an authority to buy from immediately and really start making sales straight away. So all of the tips that you share and what this business model ultimately does is it gives us a vehicle to regain control back over our lives again. So dropshipping itself, it actually lends itself to being a business where it's ultimately a lifestyle business. And it's a lot of people have that dream of the 2-hour workday. And through dropshipping and the certain automations and outsourcing that we can do, we can get it to that point where you only need to work on it for a few hours per day, if that. So how does your book help people and show people how to move towards that dream of, for example, a 2-hour workday?
Yeah, I think if you're listening to this and you're currently in a 9 to 5, there's such a big disconnect from where you are now through to the concept of a 2-hour workday or even a 2-hour work week, I would argue, is possible with this type of business model. And I've shown it. I've done it myself. I know you've done it as well. If you choose to spend more time on that business, it's because you want to grow it from where it currently is. But if you also decided, hey, I just want to live in Thailand and, earn a few £1,000s a month for the rest of my days, then you could do that and legitimately work on it 2 hours per week eventually. That's not to say it will be like that from the outset, that you do need to work and put in the hours initially to get it up and running. But I know I would rather do that initially than spend the next 40 years working 9 to 5 every single day and still end up in the same position at the end of it where, do you know what I mean? I'm trying to retire in my late 60s versus being able to do that in my 30s. So I think with the Home Turf Advantage system, I share the techniques to optimize your business's operations, the tasks, so that when you're on a plane and the pilot's like in control for takeoff and everything, and you get up to cruising altitude, and at that point they activate autopilot, right? And sometimes you see the pilot or the captain walking down the airplane and you think, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, must be someone in control. But you realize that if you're in the cockpit, they're probably there like eating their lunch and chatting and doing a bit of work and like planning the route on the iPad and stuff, but they're not flying the plane at that point because it's autopilot's activated. It's at a cruising altitude. So it's the same thing with the business. You literally, once you've done it, you can sit back, relax, and you can kind of strategize and plan your route and figure out how do we want to scale and grow the business rather than you being caught up on the day-to-day technical tasks like, steering the business and the plane at every single turn. So the goal for us is that we front load the work, we set things up the right way in an evergreen process. So we're big advocates of evergreen systems because of the lifestyle effects that provides. And then, you can just focus on growing the business. And once you're up and running, you can even hire a virtual assistant for any of those remaining tasks that need to be done by a human, like answering customer support phone calls and answering emails and things like that. And eventually, you really can step back from it. And it can be a 2-hour work day or a 2-hour work week eventually, if you'd like it to be.